We are we are live, everyone. Come on in, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Bonnie McDonald, and I'm Landmarks Illinois' President and CEO. And I can tell you, you are in for an excellent presentation today. We are going to give it just a few minutes so that everyone can join us on the Zoom and check their settings as well. So I'm going to go over just a few housekeeping items while we have our audience joining us for the live stream. So if you would like to read what Stacy is saying today, or Leila, our presenters, then you can just choose the real-time closed captioning, which is available for you. To access the real-time closed captioning, you just go to the bottom of your screen and click the CC closed captions button. There's also going to be a Q&A at the end of the program, and I'm sure after you see Stacy's incredible presentation, you're going to have a lot of questions for her. So just remember, we do have a Q&A at the very end of the program. So please post your questions in the chat. We're using the chat today. So you can do that throughout the program. If something hits you, we will go back and filter through that chat. So please make sure to do that in real time, or you can save them for the end, whichever you choose. So I believe, looking at the slide, we are ready to get started, everyone. So welcome, warm welcome, good afternoon. And I'm Bonnie McDonald again, the President and CEO of Landmarks Illinois. And, warm welcome to our first Preservation Snapshots presentation and lecture for the fall season. I just want to say this exploration lecture series, we have been doing this for quite some time. It's one of our longest running programs, in fact, where we get to feature guest presenters who are close to preservation projects and topics that are happening all across the state and that are very important to people, and also sharing the future of our field. So today's lecture is certainly exemplifying this. So today's lecture is from WTTW's documentary series, Chicago Stories. Chicago Stories uncovers fascinating histories that help to shape our world-class city, Chicago. And The Boss and the Bulldozer is one of those stories. We encourage you to watch the WTTW stories on the website there or the YouTube channel. And today, Landmarks Illinois' program manager, Leila Wills, is going to host the conversation with Stacy Robinson, who is the producer of The Boss and the Bulldozer. Before we get started, I would just like to welcome those who may be joining us for the first time and to tell you a little bit more about our organization. Landmarks Illinois is the statewide historic preservation nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1971 to help people save places that are important to them and to their communities. And our advocacy team, the people out there on the ground doing this work every day, are working on about 150 to 200 projects at any given time. They're very busy all across the state. And since our founding in 1971, we have helped people save over 24,000 historic places across our state, something we are very proud of, but there's certainly more to do. We're at the forefront as well at the change of preservation. It's not just the work that you're seeing today. I mean, what you're going to hear about is influenced preservation. It's influenced the built environment, but we're also trying to do that work long into the future. So as you're going to see in the presentation, many places that are important to people have been demolished, and raising important questions about our field in particular. How does the preservation community help preserve these stories if a building or a structure no longer exists? How does preservation tell the difficult histories of marginalized voices, especially when the built environment isn't there to help us do that? So in November of 2023, Landmarks Illinois published the Relevancy Guidebook, How We Can Transform the Future of Preservation. The guidebook identifies the field's current challenges, as I just mentioned, some of the equity and inclusion work that we're trying to do, and it presents the ways that we can make our work more just and more inclusive, and it provides actionable solutions to enhance the relevance of preservation in a changing world. And it gives you ideas and steps and resources to do that work yourself. So I hope we inspire you today. You can visit our website at www.landmarks.org to download the guidebook because it's free. We publish this as a free resource. It's a digital download. If you prefer to print things out, you can do that on your own, but we wanted to make sure it was accessible to anyone. You can also, on our website, sign up for our e-newsletters. That is free again, to see all of the work that Landmarks Illinois and our incredible partners are doing across the state to help people save these important places so that we don't have to tell the stories of demolished places. We can tell the stories of places saved. Before starting our program, I also want to thank our very dedicated and generous members and our supporters. Members, supporters, your contributions make this work possible and directly result in our impact in communities across the state. Not only that 24,000 historic places saved, but all of the people and partners that that represents as well. And we want to also thank the generous Preservation Snapshots sponsors, which include C&H Specialty Craftworks, Jack Corp, which is an architecture firm, and Vinci Hamp Architects as well. These three sponsors make it possible for us to keep this a very accessible, low-cost program. So thank you to all of those sponsors. They ensure that we can also cover stories from across the state. So I just want to say, keep your eye on the presentations to come, and we will be talking about some interesting stories from all across Illinois. We also have supporters of all of the work that we do at Landmarks Illinois. They're called our annual corporate sponsors, and who are partners in preservation in support of our work. So if you and your company want to have your company listed on these slides supporting all of the incredible work of Landmarks Illinois, I would love to speak with you. Please contact me. Again, Bonnie McDonald, the president and CEO, and I'm happy to talk to any of our partners about supporting our important work. Now, also, thank you to all the members of Landmarks Illinois. I know we're doing a lot to thank our supporters right now, but we are a nonprofit organization, and we really are dependent on the support of all of you who are generously ensuring that we can help people save places across the state. The membership is essential to our success in our advocacy, our reinvestment, our education, and our programs work. So if you're not a member, please join us today. You can do that easily at landmarks.org, and we have memberships at all scales starting at $35 a year. If you've missed any of our past lectures, you can also visit our YouTube channel to see other great presentations and projects that Landmarks Illinois is involved in. And just a reminder, going back, if you need that closed captioning, we want to make sure everybody can access this information today. The real-time closed captions are available. Go to the bottom of your screen and click the CC closed captioning button. This presentation is being recorded, everyone, and it's going to be made available later on our YouTube channel so that you can watch Stacy again and her discussion with Leila. I'm sure you're going to want to return to it as you learn the incredible work that has been done here. So today's presentation is now going to start, and I'm going to turn it over to Leila Wills, our programs manager. Thank you, and welcome, Leila.
Thank you, Bonnie. Sorry about that, everybody. You know, we have to go between these windows. I will be joined by Stacy Robinson in just a few minutes, but I did want to give a brief intro to our program today. So I will share my screen. And some of you know about my own work and the challenges that we have on the ground of trying to preserve places that or recreate places that no longer exist because of the controversial program that was called urban renewal and a lot of other things that took place. So we're going to just get started, and then we will welcome our special guest producer, Stacy Robinson. The Boss and the Bulldozer is about urban renewal, the controversial plan instituted across the United States, but the film specifically covered Chicago. So what they used to call him many things, but Old Man Daley is one of them, and he was the mayor of Chicago from 1955 until 1976. Whoops, did that go the wrong way? Hang on. Oh, here we go. Hold on, please. Okay, so part of urban renewal, sorry about that, is the expressways in Chicago. What you're looking at here is the beginning of the Eisenhower Expressway. And these expressways went directly through Chicago neighborhoods. And in the name of progress, we all do want to progress, but how do we do this in an equitable way? It's too late for what happened in the 60s, but these stories are very important on how our city was shaped since then and the current preservation efforts, and some that cannot even get off the ground because there is no structure that exists anymore. This is the Kennedy Expressway. You can see it going through the northwest side. All of this during the Daley administration, the Stevenson Expressway. During the construction of these expressways, thousands of people were displaced. And so the expressways were not the only part of urban renewal. It also had a lot to do with housing. And here in Bronzeville were the finished Robert Taylor homes. And I'm struggling not to go down a rabbit hole during all these different topics, but as you know, we can go on for quite a bit talking about this. And what happened with the housing is and urban renewal, the city was able to use eminent domain as a tool where it was marketed as a way to modernize the city and to clear out the slums. But the word blight, a blighted building, a blighted area, it actually became a buzzword for demolition. And I dare to say, Bonnie can correct me if I'm wrong, it may still be a buzzword today when they want to demolish things. So these housing projects that were marketed as, providing great homes and for the Black people on the south and the near north side and the west side, they actually they maintained the status quo where you will see the red line district. It just made the concentration of Black people in these small areas just grow exponentially. And then you saw a decrease in city services like sewage and cleaning and garbage pickup and those kind of things. So it's not like things turned from this into a slum overnight or without some kind of formula. There was a formula on how these places ended up being slums. Another thing that's interesting in my research when you talk about urban renewal is that a lot of the people, the radicals around during the 60s said that whenever they knew when the mayor was going to take over a neighborhood because he would put a college in it, some of the city colleges of Chicago. So I will end my commentary there. But I did just want to show you, I hope you had a chance to watch the Boss and the Bulldozer. And if you haven't, please watch it after this presentation with Stacy. And with that, Stacy, I would like to introduce her. She's an award-winning filmmaker, documentarian. She's the producer of The Boss and the Bulldozer. And I personally thank WTTW for all of their work in documenting these intricate and intimate stories of our city. That there's some great programs and they make them all available for free. And WTTW is a great resource for our city. It's one of the best public television stations across the country that I've seen. So with that, Stacy, are you there?
I am here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks
you.
so
And
much
thank
for joining us today. And I just thank you for this film. And you packed in a lot in that short amount of time. And I mean, we could give like a numerous series of just breaking down a lot of what was in there. But I don't want to hold off the people, but welcome again and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for that that warm welcome. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate the work that you do at Landmark Illinois. When you speak about something like the relevancy guidebook, which I didn't know existed, but I am inspired by that. Especially after working on this film in particular was a struggle because, and it's been a struggle, it's oftentimes a struggle to tell historical Chicago stories, but especially historical Chicago stories about some of the smaller neighborhoods, because so much is now gone. So when you tell a story like this about urban renewal, the difficulty is already embedded in telling the story because so many of the buildings and the neighborhoods that you want to depict and show the richness and the value of are no longer there. And what we have instead are kind of these either disinvested neighborhoods, that don't have the same sort of vibrancy or culture that they once carried, or they've been completely replaced by something like the Illinois Circle campus. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to make my first attempt at sharing my screen, which I'm hoping I can do pretty easily. I'm going to share it and then I'm going to enlarge it. If you'll just bear with me for just a minute.
Yep.
And then I think I can do that. So should be able to see my screen. I'm going to open up briefly for this to show the slideshow.
Wonderful.
So, and we can see it, right?
Yes, full screen.
Okay, great. So when I first spoke with WTTW and the series in general, Chicago Stories, this is sort of a reformat. Chicago Stories is a reboot of a series that they did many years ago, and it was very successful. A lot of the stories were half hours. There's so many great Chicago stories. One of the things when they talked about the reboot of the series, which I was involved in with the first story that I did, Ida B. Wells, but this one was kind of a second one. I've done a few about Chicago. There was really this intention to not just tell stories of Chicago, but explore a different lens with which to view our history, right? Because we are now sitting in a place where we know that some of the history that we've learned was maybe has changed, maybe been sanitized, but or oftentimes was always told from the same lens, from the same perspective is what I mean. So a story like this, The Boss and the Bulldozer, we really were looking to tell it from a perspective of the neighborhoods and the people that were impacted by Richard J. Daley and his plans for the city and the impact that they had on their neighborhoods, not just sort of a biopic about Daley and the beautiful city that we know of, Chicago. So I'm gonna stop sharing long enough to just kind of share. I would like to. I'm not sure how many people in the audience have seen the show, so I apologize if it seems repetitive, but I'm hoping that some of the clips that I show will open the doorway for some conversation, and I can give you some of the kind of behind the scenes details. So, but I do want to start with this very first open because I think it kind of sets the stage for the way the city of Chicago that we see today, the way it is, the way it was a plan, the way it's laid out, and how that impacts the way our city interacts with each other. This idea of how we're kind of separated by the north, south, and west sides. So just one moment, and I'll try to switch from that.
There were a few things where I'll let you keep doing that, that the film went into, but I'll just wait until we get a little further along to see if it's there, and if not, I'll just bring it up at the end.
Okay. See, I always know I'm going to inspire Leila to have something for this. We get into some pretty heated conversations. It's not heated, but I don't know, animated. That's what I'll say.
Yes,
we have some very animated. I think we share some of the same viewpoints, but we can have some pretty animated conversations. So I'm gonna move to share this.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I'm sharing my sound, optimize this video clip, and this is the first clip in the series. I'm just going to let it play.
Wonderful.
The brilliant Chicago skyline. It's like a shout out to the world that this is a city of guts and aspiration.
You watch a movie, and if the establishing shot is anywhere downtown, everyone in America knows exactly what that is.
Yet the buildings downtown signify something more. They're also the midpoint of a city, geographically divided.
Chicago has a center, a loop, as we call it, and everything radiates from that And as a result, the downtown splits the city. North side, south side, west side.
People boast about who's the best side, but there's a lot of segregation. Even nationally, the South Side is known as the black side. The North Side is known as the white, wealthier, more privileged side.
Chicago is still two cities.
A symbol of that divide came crashing down in 1997 with the end of Robert Taylor Homes. 28 high-rise buildings located on the South Side that housed thousands of Chicago's poorest residents. Chicago would eventually demolish more high-rise housing projects than any city in the nation. A billion-dollar attempt to undo its failed policy of urban renewal. Richard M. Daley, Chicago's mayor at the time, oversaw the demolition. Ironically, the policies that created them in the first place were enacted by his father, Mayor Richard J. Daley.
This project represents the future of a great city, and that is a decent home for every family in every great...
Richard J. Daley was the boss. His critics would say something of a bully. Others would say authoritative. I guess it depends on sort of how you look at it. He was extraordinarily powerful and not timid about using his power.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll apologize. I didn't quite have the full screen, but I think
Yeah.
Oh, was
It
it
was
full
full
screen?
screen. Yeah.
Okay, good, very good. All right, technology, still getting the handle on it. So I am going to share screen once again, just to kind of start this presentation, but we'll work with that.
Yeah.
We can kind of get that started. So there we go. I think we got it. So when we first started with the boss and the bulldozer, so the tagline really is it's about Richard J. Daley. This is the old man, as Leila mentioned, and his plan to kind of reshape Chicago. So one of the things that I'm not a historian, and I'm not a preservationist, and I'm not an urban historian. As a producer, the very first thing I try to do is like gather all the information and uncover the story and find a way to try to tell, bring sort of the human story behind sort of a complicated conversation or subject. And so one of the very first things that I think I learned about trying to do a story about Richard J. Daley is that typical in Chicago, there was the city was very divided in the way that they felt about Richard J. Daley. He was mayor from 1955 to 1976. Many people in Chicago, he was the only mayor they knew from the time that they were born in the city until they were young adults. So he was both absolutely loved and also vilified, and trying to find a balance between, or the reasons behind why people felt that way about him. So this first slide that I'm showing was kind of to represent that idea. And there's no doubt that he did a lot of great and wonderful things for Chicago, but there were also some challenges, and there was sort of another side to there was the reverse side of some of the good, was some of the very damaging things that we're still living with today. So one of the I think the important things to know about Chicago, which we really tried to define in the story, because you could not tell the story of Daley and his plan for Chicago without really trying to unpack where he came from and where the citizens of the idea that the citizens of Chicago were indeed, this is a city of immigrants. This is a melting pot. This is a city of hard workers and labor. And Daley really, I think one of the things about him is he really defined that. So, you know, that on the left, there's a slide. I think it's on your left. It's on everybody's left. On the left, there's a slide that shows Daley at the Chicago Stock Exchange. He's from the South Side. This is his neighborhood, historically Irish, Catholic, also Polish and Lithuanian. A neighborhood section that was full of a lot of immigrants, but a lot of white immigrants. And the side on the other side, on the slide on the right, is Daley at what looks to be an event in Little Italy, about to enjoy a slice of pizza, which kind of to me shows that Daley, I think everybody, even if Daley wasn't from your neighborhood, there was an idea that he understood what it meant to be in small neighborhoods in Chicago, and that he would be looking out for you. So the Democratic Party and Daley were really, really very, they were very intentional about catering to each of those neighborhoods. He knew the value of that, and it was very important for the voting structure of Chicago. But when Daley first came into office, he came to Chicago, and he came into office after many years in politics, but he came into Chicago at a very pivotal time in the history of the United States. He came into the office at a time when American cities like Chicago were losing population and industry to the suburbs. People had been in the city for many years. They had gone through the Depression, and they had built up cities full of industry, full of people, full of immigrants. But now people were tiring of the city, and they were moving to suburbia. And suburbia offered a promise of greener pastures for some. And that's what I think I'd like to, that's kind of what I'd like to hit on as I show this next clip, which I think hopefully does a pretty good explanation of how the this time that Daley entered into office would impact how our city was structured and the city that we know today.
And while you're pulling that up, Stacy, I want to talk about, I love in the film how you showed the making of the machine. Okay, so we all call the machine, the Democratic machine of Chicago and all of that, but the film actually, it's just a small part, but you guys did unpack the making of the machine and how it was dependent on European ethnic groups and the Black vote, and that carried Daley a number of years while he was in office.
Great. Let me know if this is full screen. Is it full screen for you? It is.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's a bit of technology. So I'll let this next clip kind of speak for itself, and then we can pick up the conversation from there. But hopefully it'll sort of speaks towards, it doesn't talk about the machine, so that'll give you something to watch the show to hear more about. But it certainly does talk a bit about the status of the city when Daley first came into office.
I have lived in one neighborhood of Chicago all my life.
One of his great assets in Chicago politics is that he maintained those ties to family and neighbors. He continued to live in a house a few doors down from where his parents lived.
Kind of rainy, eh? How are you?
He was, for many folks, a genuine Chicagoan.
They say you're tough. Do you think of yourself as tough?
I wouldn't say tough, but my mother and father told me never back down from any man if you think you're right. And I suppose we were taught how to use our fists when we were young. You had to do that.
He was not a great orator, but in that way, too, he reflected the way most people in this city spoke.
Gentlemen, get the thing straight once and for all. The policeman isn't there to create disorders. The policeman is there to preserve disorders.
He was famous for his malapropisms. He would let his thinking get ahead of his speaking, and he would say dumb things sometimes.
What keeps people apart? The inability of getting together.
I think he operated, especially with the press, on don't write what I say, write what I mean.
If Daley lost some battles with the English language, he had no trouble communicating his will.
I'm not an ill. I don't care whether you like it or not.
As mayor and party leader, he consolidated power over City Hall.
Because as long as I'm mayor, no one will be stepped on. I resent and no one has to be stepped on. And that goes for you, too.
When Daley first was in office, there were 14 opponents in the city council, 13 of them Republicans. As Daley stayed in power, the Republican Party more and more disappeared.
If you were an alderman or if you were another elected official, you wanted things done for your ward, you had to go kiss the ring. You had to go kiss the ring at City Hall, and that was the mayor.
Now, Daley used that muscle to launch a plan he'd devote the rest of his life to: building the modern city of Chicago.
As mayor of Chicago, I shall have only one goal: to make this city a better and more beautiful place in which to live.
Chicago had always been prized for its world-class architecture. But now the city seemed down on its heels.
Daley comes in 1955. That's after the Great Depression, when nothing gets built. Then World War II.
When Daley took office, he could stand on the corner of Michigan and Randolph with some pride. The loop itself, just to the west of where he was standing, was kind of crummy.
Daley comes in, and there's a real desire to get the city going again.
Across America in 1955, the economy was booming. But Chicago was losing population. Instead, the American dream was being realized outside the city limits.
You had all this land outside of cities. This is where the baby boom happens, right? And where are people making babies? In their homes. And where were those new homes being built? In the suburbs.
These young adults, shopping with the same determination that led them to the suburbs in the first place, are the goingest part of a nation on wheels.
People were heading to suburbia. People were looking to live in suburbia and shop in suburbia.
So much pent-up demand.
By the 1950s, the Federal Housing Administration was subsidizing builders who could mass-produce entire subdivisions. The FHA went a step further by ensuring loans and 30-year mortgages so that middle-class Americans could afford to buy them. Towns like Park Forest exploded overnight with new schools, shopping malls, and industrial parks.
So people were moving to the suburbs in droves. Now, who was moving to the suburbs in droves?
And those people were mainly white people. When African Americans tried to follow because they wanted to live a different life in the suburbs, they weren't welcome.
The Federal Housing Administration was an organization of its time. So the FHA's rules were as racist as was the country. They thought that Black people were bad for property values. They would not insure mortgages if Black people were in neighborhoods nearby, or surely not insure mortgages for Black people to buy houses.
The FHA drew red lines around Chicago's Black and brown neighborhoods. Known as redlining, the FHA warned banks not to lend there.
Okay.
Great explainer. Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving sort of on that same, I got your note too, Leila. Thank you. As a way to help explain what that meant for what the FHA loans meant and what it really meant for Daley in terms of Richard J. Daley, in terms of what he has to deal with now in a city that he's facing, that populations are moving out, they're moving to the suburbs, and exactly who it is that's moving to the suburbs. And here's a map that is taken from the National Archives that really shows, it's from the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and it really delineates those red lines. This map is actually from the south side of Chicago. It starts about 31st Street that you see here, and you can see that the red lines are absolutely do not lend. The second grade are blue. So when you look at the city of where, so the first grades are green, which in the city, there's almost none, right? I think there's a little tiny dot, probably Hyde Park. It's probably right there at the university. There's a second grade, which is blue, which is very limited. There's some yellow, which is third grade, still difficult to get, probably to get FHA. And then there's red, where there are no loans being made. There is nothing coming from the government. So the government really is, this as an agency, the government really is an agency of its time, which is racist. It's not, there was an intentional, it was the intention of the government really not to put money into neighborhoods where they deemed, and I mean, these were specifically neighborhoods of color. So this underwriting manual from the FHA manual that's used is indicative of, it was the guidebook for getting loans. It was also a guidebook for any banks or anything else to make loans from, and it specifically, you can read it. It's pretty fascinating, but it specifically says areas surrounding a location, which means even if you had a site, they were looking at areas surrounding a location are investigated to determine whether incompatible racial and social groups are present for the purpose of making predictions regarding the probability of the location being invaded by such groups. So if you think about the word blight and what it means, when you really break it down, it really is it's a term taken from biology, right? Blight is what we think of when we think of our crops or our plants getting a disease and spreading and taking over and killing. So when they talk about blighted neighborhoods, what that really translates to and who it is that lives in these areas that are deemed blighted, it is very stigmatizing to think that brown and Black people are thought of as a disease. But when you really investigate it, that is what we're looking at. This site here. So, Daley's facing this issue that his city is becoming, this worry that the city is going to be overrun by blight and the whole city is going to become blight and there will be no business and all the business will be in the suburbs. So his answer is to build, right? So urban renewal and land clearance. And this is a great picture. I just love it because it feels like they have this display for people to come and look at it. It looks like they went to the offices of the secretarial pool at City Hall and picked out some lovely ladies with the greatest legs to come and stand in front of the photos and show people of like this plan for, this one is for the new Hyde Park, but these were doled out in certain places. So it's saving what is good, adding what is better to create the new Hyde Park in Kenwood. This is from the Chicago Public Library. And this is what we saw in some of the smaller neighborhoods. This is on 56th Street. The eviction of a business on 55th Street has purchased this, Chicago Land Clearance Committee has purchased this property. We must vacate. So going out of business is what we saw in these blighted areas for the idea that there was a common good. And I know we don't have very much time, but we can, hopefully we can talk more about this in questions and answers, because it has to be said that while this was a plan, a lot of cities were doing it.
Yeah.
Daley was most certainly doing it, but in his answer to build, there was many of the beautiful things we see in Chicago today. There was the Daley Center and Daley Plaza, which I think was originally called the Civic Center, McCormick Place, Marina Towers, which I have some great Marina Towers clips, but I don't think we have time to share them. But Sears Tower, the Hancock, the Congress Expressway, which brought all those people from the suburbs downtown every day to work. It used to be difficult to get downtown to work if you were going to move out to the suburbs. To keep the downtown going, these highways that Leila mentioned before made these connections to Chicago, and there's no doubt that they were amazing. O'Hare and the O'Hare expansion, it was a little airport, this O'Hare expansion, and UIC, which is the first city college that we had. We also have to think about the other big buildings and changes in the city that were made, and the way that those were envisioned and what the policies were behind that. And I think that's like Robert Taylor Homes, Cabrini Green, the Dan Ryan, which is an expressway, but the Dan Ryan was undoubtedly very specifically built, especially that. I mean, the Dan Ryan was really built to kind of separate and segregate Daley's own beloved neighborhood of Bridgeport and some of the others from this growing, expanding Black Belt. So people are very much, like Leila said, being pushed into an area with little and littler places to go. Here is Daley and the Picasso. I mean, we can't look at some of the things that Daley did and really not think about the impact of what they did in terms of making this like a really vibrant and modern city. He was on the cover of Time magazine. The city had come out of these like trenches of despair to be one of the most modern cities. The idea of the L train transportation that moved right down the center of the highways. Nobody had done that before. It's not all Daley, but it's like the Daley and the city planners in Chicago were amazing. The sad thing is that they couldn't have used some of that thinking and forward thinking and modernization in the same way in what they envisioned for these outside neighborhoods. And why would they? Because they were already sort of considered to be blight and maybe not worth it. The picture here shows Florence Scala and some women from the Little Italy neighborhood who had stormed Daley's office because they, even though some of them had, like Florence Scala had really worked, she'd worked on the land clearance committee to help find blighted neighborhoods. She worked for it because she thought it was going to bring the neighborhood good. What it turned out to bring was the end of their Italian community as they saw it.
And when you say good, you mean she thought that urban renewal was going to bring investment in their neighborhoods. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They knew that their neighborhood was run down. It was run down around the edges. If I have time to show one more clip, I will, but I think we're at the end of our time.
Go right ahead. Let's just get one more in just to round out the story. Yeah.
I will.
And Bonnie will jump on when it's time for Q&A, but she's wrapping up, Bonnie.
Okay. I'm trying to get there.
No,
I was so worried that I wouldn't have enough time to explain things.
No, the neighborhood piece is very important. To that people in neighborhoods were fans of urban renewal because they thought it was going to bring investment in their neighborhoods. And when she found out otherwise, that it was a totally different story.
It was really too late. And when you talk about a clip that showed Daley's power structure and how entrenched he was the most formidable mayor in the United States. There's no doubt about it. I mean, presidents met with him. The Queen of England came to visit Chicago during Daley's administration. He was really power wielding when they say he was the boss. So these ladies that come with their lunch boxes to fight the mayor, he was incensed, and he was pretty disrespectful about how dare they. He was really not used to being fought in that way. But I'll say
Chicagoans saw blocks surrounding City Hall transform, and a new crop of skyscrapers went up, filling out the city's skyline. For people thinking of fleeing to the suburbs, Daley offered a thrilling alternative: a 3-acre complex known as Marina City.
On the very site where Chicago began, a city within a city has been built.
Tubular towers rising over the river with 900 apartments and its own marina.
This self-contained city, again, had an answer to people leaving the city for suburbia. And Marina City is an answer.
For businesses eyeing the suburbs, the answer was the newly opened McCormick Place, the nation's biggest convention hall. But in most respects, Daley's vision focused on the Loop Business District.
The mayor was known as a builder. The skyscrapers, the parks, the trees, everything that the mayor was doing was about downtown. And that's white downtown. That's wealthy downtown.
This sort of sounds like trickle-down economics in some ways, right? You put all the resources here, and then it's going to trickle down to the neighborhoods. Well, how much trickles down? Are they just going to collect the scraps that fall off the table?
But Daley couldn't just ignore the outlying neighborhoods. That spring, within a stone's throw of the Loop, he focused on the Francis Cabrini homes. The cluster of public housing units was home to a melting pot of cultures, but it was now overflowing.
You could look at these outlying areas that were very, very blighted within a mile of Lakeshore Drive. People did not have indoor plumbing. So you're going to build a tall tower with bathrooms and all brand new paint and brand new things for these people who live here. God bless you, Mayor Daley, is what most people probably thought.
Cabrini would eventually include 15 high-rise public housing apartment buildings. But as the city's black population doubled in number, more would soon migrate to Cabrini, and more whites would flee.
It was very racist when I came up. You were taught, you let one move in, the whole neighborhood goes. So that was under Old Man Daley.
As the city looked to public housing as the answer, the Racial Balancing Act would become more complicated for the mayor.
One of the really important themes, I think, that Daley had to deal with was this racial tension. A huge and growing black population running out of space, and where are they going to go? And the neighboring white population said, well, you're not coming here.
Chicago's black population would have been moving into an ever more restricted geographic area.
The densest overcrowding within the Black Belt, on the city's south side, was a 6-mile stretch of land cynically dubbed the Federal Street Slums.
Outsiders are looking at it as a ghetto, as a slum. They look at it as a place with lots of trash or overcrowded. Of course, that overcrowdedness is completely manufactured by the inability of people to move out because of mob violence or realtors' pacts not to sell to black people.
We must provide the opportunity for every citizen to have decent housing. We must have slum clearance. We must prevent the spread of blight into the other neighborhoods.
The wrecking balls struck along Federal Street in 1959, to make way for Robert Taylor homes.
A lot of older housing stock demolished to build shiny new high-rises. The supposed manifestation of modernity, of being a modern post-World War II society.
The plan called for 28 16-story towers. Replacing a 2-mile stretch of slum housing, city leaders promised sleek geometry. Housing advocates weren't swayed, saying the buildings were concentrated in already racially segregated neighborhoods.
Give them these high-rise buildings and contain them there. And the message got heard all the way on the south side. We don't want you downtown. The downtown is for the wealthy, the downtown is for the privileged.
2 miles west of the Loop, the declining neighborhood of the near West Side had also caught the mayor's attention.
I'm very happy to announce that the city of Chicago has filed application with the federal government for an urban renewal program on the west side of Chicago, and will be aimed at making the city a better and a finer place in which to live.
Taylor Street had been bypassed by the city's renewal efforts until now. It had become home to a growing number of Black and Mexican immigrants. But Taylor Street's close-knit Italians stayed.
On Saturday nights, a shopkeeper would put her jukebox out on the street and people would dance. Everyone I knew was Italian, and everything we did was Italian. There was a famous hair commercial about, do blondes have more fun?
Why not be a blonde and see?
I thought, I don't even know a blonde. So
People here were deeply connected to the neighborhood, even if it was worn at the edges.
They were working class homes and small family businesses that were maintained pretty well. Most of the men in the neighborhood all had city jobs. Everything was, you look after me, I'll look after you. So the neighborhood was heavily Democrat.
And when Daley and City Hall pitched urban renewal as a blessing, they believed them.
Federal money available, what a miracle. Who would ever thought of such a thing?
Yeah. And each neighborhood, I think something that has been lost, and then I'll let you finish, Stacy, is that each neighborhood had such, so yeah, we had redlining, we had segregation and still do to this day. But also in those neighborhoods are just the individual character of each of those communities and ethnic groups that I think make a very rich city as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, did you want to say anything after that clip?
No, I think I agree. It goes back to the way that you approach urban renewal. I mean, I think urban renewal, it has a bad name. If it really was renewal of if the renewal came with the kind of the respect and the care of for the people that live there, and also with their input, which it obviously did not with Daley, not much at least. Yeah, I think we'd be in a better place. So things to think of as we move forward, you know.
Stacy, that we appreciate the clips because the film is really weaving together many deeply complicated issues and layered issues. We're talking about the sort of integration or the intersectionality of many aspects of living together in a society, and that it's pulling them apart is very difficult. So this could have been, a mini series. So, right, there's so much that you covered here today, and we're deeply thankful to have your voice, laying over what you did as a producer. So, please, we encourage everybody to watch The Boss and the Bulldozer. And I thank you because I learned things during this short presentation. So we want to have some time for our Q&A. There are just some comments that one being from, or a couple being from longtime board member of ours, Richard Friedman, who's a land use attorney, that he just wanted to point out, of course, that urban renewal was not restricted to the downtown downtown area. There were projects that were happening in Hyde Park, of course. You mentioned Little Italy and the UIC campus, but there's also Prairie Shores, Lake Meadows, Carl Sandburg Village, which is just north of the Loop, and the IIT campus, of course, which we've seen some wonderful coverage there about the Mecca Flats and that IIT's, sort of a whole-scale demolition of that part of Bronzeville. So anything you want to comment on about that in his comment?
No, I'm sorry. And I was reading through some of the comments.
Mhm.
I think so I
Yeah.
was getting distracted because I think it's always difficult to come and speak in front of really, really engaged audience like you
Yeah.
folks at Landmark, Illinois, because again, I am it is difficult to include all the aspects and also all the important but small facts that kind of that all have some pertinence to a story like this. So I agree with everything that everybody's saying. It's all true. Sometimes things are kind of like said in shorthand or not included, even though they're important, or you may give an impression of something else. For instance, like Marina Tower and John Hancock were not urban renewal projects, and they were private projects, but I would say that all that private building and everything else was certainly getting the full support and tax breaks and everything that we see today for those kinds of things from the city of Chicago. And and he had a building plan, so there's a whole plan, a set of planners. I think it has to do with some of that has to do with the money involved that's being the support that the city is given to certain areas and perhaps not to others.
Well, I think Richard's comment does help us to understand one of the things that I was considering as you were talking is the book, The Color of Law, done by Richard Rothstein, which is a fantastic resource for those who may be learning this for the first time or be somewhat suspect that how could our federal government do this or our local government? And Richard's research, again, the book is called The Color of Law, and it's from Richard worked for the Southern Poverty Law Center about the collusion between the federal government, local governments, the Federal Home Loan Bank, funders, Fannie Mae, and private institutions as well. So you just illustrated that by showing private works as well. So I wanted to give that resource to people as they watch this, if they want to know more in depth on what were these tools that were used to prevent people from having access to these resources. Leila.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to say, because we know urban renewal included, which the people who called it people removal, the Puerto Ricans in Lincoln Park, and then the poor whites in Uptown. Like, so we it's so hard. That was one of my questions for you, but I'll ask you another. It's so hard of all the information you had to jam into a film of that length.
Yeah, it is. And I think that that's why, in some ways, I think I usually, as a filmmaker, try to isolate personal stories that, like I said before, kind of put like a human voice on some of the larger issues. So Little Italy is just one of the neighborhoods impacted. Of course, like Lincoln Park is another, and Sandburg Terrace. The story of Florence Scala kind of brought it to this very human scale, and there's enough footage, photographs, and her family members there to explain it. I think the last gentleman you see in the last clip is her nephew who's still alive and who lived in that neighborhood. It really is difficult. Just like it's difficult to find the buildings, it's also difficult to find the people to put kind of a human aspect on a story. It could have been a miniseries though, and I hope
yes.
It,
I hope so, because even today I think we could go more, we could have an hour of conversation about this. And so Leila, perhaps that's a follow-up we can do, but we are unfortunately at our time, everyone. And just a thank you to you. Maybe we can squeeze in this from Caroline Hugh, who has been our wonderful intern with our Most Endangered program. Do you know if there were any precedents or inspiration from other cities for Daley's urban renewal plan. I think that's key. Was he following a plan? Was he following a methodology from someplace else, or did urban renewal start here?
No, I think he was being influenced. I can't say for sure, but and I'm not sure if I recall from my research, but I know he was. I'm sure he was being influenced on things that were happening in other cities, especially in New York. There was a very intense urban renewal project happening in New York. Some of the ideas for this sort of like this modern, Robert Taylor Homes was supposed to be this modern utopia, and it had some plans in it that really were, that really may have, if they had been implemented, if the money, in some ways the money dried up. So if they had been implemented, they may have helped restore, they may have helped fulfill that dream of creating a modern legacy. Like they were supposed to be businesses on the bottom of and kind of and parkways and things that were built, that when the money started to dry up, which is what happened with Robert Taylor Homes, or when people started to like take shortcuts, there was a lot of shoddy work that came out because they were not getting the money and the funding like some other projects were, and some of these private projects were. So that's another thing. And I do think that Daley was looking to Detroit, which was a place that we did not want to be. And in the end, we did not suffer as much, I think, as Detroit. I think that I know that there was a big Times article and they compared what was happening in Chicago in terms of a modern city of success versus where Detroit and some of the other, maybe St. Louis, I can't remember exactly, were headed. So, Daley was, he's touted for this, and I think he deserves that credit. I think he was a man of his time, and I think he was also a man of the neighborhoods. And if you'd ask Daley now, I think he probably believed he was doing a lot of good for the African-American neighborhoods and the other neighborhoods. But coming from that neighborhood, it's very, people were very protect your own first. So while he was doing good for other neighborhoods, I just don't think he could feel the same for people from other neighborhoods as he did for his own community, perhaps.
That is an ending, a poignant ending, something for us to all think about as many of us who live in this city. So Stacy, I want to, unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but I would like to say especially thank you for your work here, for being here to explain more of your methodology and thinking around this, of course, to Leila for, seeding this conversation. And hopefully we can think of some opportunities to continue the conversation and bring the resources that you're talking about, because there's so much more if people want to know about this work, and others urban historians who have done work like this to help us understand it. So just to say thank you very much today, everybody. Again, the film is The Boss and the Bulldozer. It is a documentary you can find at WTTW on their website and the YouTube channel. Go watch it, please. And I'm sure that you enjoyed today as much as we did as a team. So keep coming back. We have 2 other presentations that are coming up, one on October 10th that is going to be with Sandra Steinbrecher, who's a photographer who covered the salt shed, the Morton salt shed, which used to be the Morton salt warehouse, and its transformation. So if you want to see this work of transformation, photo by photo, and especially the people doing the work, come back on October 10th at noon for that presentation. And then on November 12th, we will have Al Watts here from the Preservation Partners of the Fox Valley to discuss the Alexander Brothers blacksmith shop in Geneva, which was one of our most endangered historic places. It was a very important site threatened with demolition, and we're excited to come and talk to you about the advocacy effort and what it took to save this building, at this point, to get it to where we feel it's a save at this point. And we encourage you to, if you're thinking about resources, how do you engage in your own preservation work? We do have our grants programs. We have a deadline coming up on October 1st, very soon, for our Preservation Heritage Fund and our Barbara C. and Thomas E. Donnelly II Preservation Fund for Illinois. So make sure that you apply for those. It's a very easy application process. So if you have questions, please look more at the website. And if you need more, give us a call. Suzanne German, our Director of Reinvestment, is here to guide you through that process. And we also have our Richard H. Driehaus, our Landmarks Illinois Richard H. Driehaus Foundation Preservation Awards coming up on October 18th, our feel-good event of the year. Come learn more about the places that have been saved. So today's presentation in many ways was about the places that weren't saved, and the harm done by that. This is about the places people have saved together, reshaping, reinvesting. So we hope that you'll be with us. We've had this program since 1994, and we will be in a neighborhood resource, Apollo's 2000 Theater, and the incredible people who have saved that place as an event center. So join us there to see preservation in action. We also want to say that this work, again, the Snapshots lecture isn't possible without our donors, supporters, our corporate sponsors. So thank you again to our corporate sponsors, and of course to our annual corporate sponsors. I want to call out that Arda Design. Thank you to Arda. Previously Bauer Latoza Studio. So their old logo is here, but look for Arda, not Bauer Latoza, everybody. But if you'd like to join us as a sponsor, again, please call me. So again, Stacy, Leila, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And we hope to have you back for these interesting lectures that we have coming up on October 10th, November 14th. Until then, take care, and we'll see you at the awards on the 18th of October. All right. Thank you. Take care.